Welcome to Perspectives Online and on air from WFSU Public Media. I'm Tom Flanigan. This program using the Zoom platform, pre-recorded on Tuesday, November 3rd, Election Day, for playback on Thursday, November 5th. And the show will appear on both WFSU FM and our WFSU Public Media Facebook page. Here in the state of Florida, we have an observance that has been going on for many, many years, and it revolves around a historical occasion in the city of Tallahassee that took place on May 20th in 1865. And that was the initial reading of the Emancipation Proclamation from the steps of the Knott House. And that is recreated every year. We had to make an exception, of course, this year because of the pandemic, but it is a traditional occurrence and celebration here in the capital city. And it has importance and significance to the entire state of Florida. Well, today we're going to talk about that significance and importance with an all-star panel who are attempting to make this a celebration statewide and recognized throughout the state of Florida. You might think, gee, that sounds like a kind of easy situation to engender. And you would be right, except for the fact that there is a competing observance that also has some of its own traction and proponents and advocates right now. And we're going to talk about that. So let's go around and meet an absolutely outstanding panel. And we are going to first send out thank you to Althemese Barnes, who really got the ball rolling on this and put this outstanding group of people together. Althemese Director Emeritus of the John G. Reilly House Museum and noted Tallahassee historian, cultural preservation advocate, and all-around great gal. Althemese, it is a delight to see your face, maskless, and right there in front of us today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Tom, for having us.
We also meet our Tallahassee Mayor Pro Tem, City Commissioner Dianne Williams-Cox, who is part of this as well. Commissioner, thank you for joining the conversation today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
From the legacy communities of North Florida, let us meet the founder, president, and CEO in the persona of Dr. Sandra Thompson. Dr. Thompson, thank you for being part of this too.
Delighted to be here with everyone.
We even bring the military into the equation here. We have a retired sergeant who now heads up the U.S. Colored Troops. He is a member of the 2nd Infantry Regiment. And when we go through the reenactment over at the Knott House or the celebration over at the Strong Park, he is there in full regalia, and that is Jarvis Rosier. Thank you for coming and being part of this today too, Jarvis.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate the invite there.
So much history to talk about. You got to have a historian, specifically the president of the Tallahassee Historical Society, who rejoins us this week. Back-to-back appearances here, Bob Holladay. Good to see you again, sir. Okay, you better unmute there, Bob, so we can hear you.
My mistake. Thank you again, Tom, for asking me.
Yes, sir. It is always a pleasure. And we wind up with the curator of the L.B. Brown Museum in Bartow. Clifton Lewis is on the line to join us for this discussion today. And Mr. Lewis, thank you for being part of this as well.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, let us begin with the history, and let's start with the historian, Bob Holladay here. May 20th. In 1865, in Tallahassee, Florida, the initial reading of the Emancipation Proclamation as the state became one of the Confederate presences that was giving up to the ascendancy of the Union. And how did that take place? That was like what, right after the Battle of Natural Bridge and all that thing. How did the Union troops come to Tallahassee and get on the steps of the Knott House to read the proclamation to the assembled multitudes?
Well, they marched in after the Battle of Natural Bridge. Tallahassee was the only Confederate capital to really not fall to Union troops. I mean, they marched in after the surrender at Appomattox and so forth, and really technically the end of the war. And so Tallahassee, in a way, got off very easy as far as the destruction and so forth from the war. But General McCook's troops marched in and went up to the Knott House and read the Emancipation Proclamation. And if I can say something just a second, I don't want to take more time than I should here, but I've always thought the whole idea of nationalizing Juneteenth as a national holiday, which is where all of this got started as far as I'm concerned, was really kind of odd. First of all, because Juneteenth is Texas. I mean, why do you want to nationalize something that happened in Texas? And secondly, of course, as we all know, the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free all the slaves. That didn't come until December when the ratification of the 13th Amendment. I mean, I'm from Tennessee. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't free the slaves in Tennessee or Kentucky or Maryland or even Delaware. So it was a wartime document done for very strategic purposes, and which made it odd to me that they would try to nationalize Juneteenth on this. So I'll stop right there. I'll say some more later, but I'll throw that in.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate, though, the historical context on that. Althemese Barnes, though, when the proclamation was read in Tallahassee on May 20th, 1865, you had people from all over the city who came to hear General McCook make that proclamation. And it was not just the white folks who worked downtown. There were formerly enslaved peoples who were also there in that audience, were there not?
That is correct. And it's interesting that even as a child, when I was in school, it was a holiday for us until I think I got around maybe 5th or 6th grade, and the public school district started giving money to the school that I attended. And at that point, the holiday ceased, but May 20th was always a holiday that Blacks observed here in Tallahassee. And yes, on May 20th, everybody came in to hear that enforcement reading at the Knott House. And from that point on, celebrations have occurred. And not only were people here from Tallahassee, but the fact check shows news articles where people from Jackson County, Jacksonville, other parts of the state came. And they were even commemorating as far down as Delray later on, and places in Central and some parts of South Florida, May 20th.
Exactly. Since you brought that up, Clifton Lewis, even down in Bartow, how long did it take for the word to get from Tallahassee down to other parts of the state to the now being, people who were being freed, and the word is coming out that, oh my gosh, the world has changed for you very profoundly?
Well, I'm not sure there's one answer to that question, because Florida, is a very large state, and the communication was pretty basic back then. But I can say this, and I want to touch on this idea of the Emancipation Proclamation being read on that date, because the implication is that it was on May 20th when Florida became aware of it. That is not the case. Florida, as a Confederate state, would have been aware back in September 22nd, 1862, when Lincoln first issued the preliminary document. It was not that they were not aware, they just ignored it because Lincoln was not the president of the Confederacy. He was, Jefferson Davis was. So the issue was that they simply ignored the proclamation. What happened on May 20th was that General McCook read it, indeed he did, but it was the beginning of the enforcement of emancipation in Florida. And so my guess is that strategically, I'm guessing here, General Cook must have placed troops throughout different parts of the state that on that day they began fanning out to notify the plantation owners that the slaves should be freed. We have a document here that dated in May of 1865 that showed that a young lady by the name of Margaret Watkins, who was 8 years old at the time, mentioned that during May of 1865, a group of Black soldiers came to that plantation and notified her father that the slaves were to be set free. And although she did mention that they were gentlemanly in every way, so I don't know exactly what date and time, but it was in May that happened. And so again, the point I want to emphasize is that it was an enforcement action, not just a reading.
Okay, and Jarvis Rosier, as a member of the 2nd Infantry Colored Troops, your ancestors there with that organization would have been empowered to go out into the hinterlands and the highways and let people know that that enforcement action now had the force of law in Florida, right?
That's correct. And what Clifton, Mr. Lewis just mentioned, those soldiers, African-American soldiers, were members of the 2nd Infantry Regiment, United States Colored Troop, the actual regiment that we represent that fought at the Battle of Natural Bridge. Those were those soldiers that went out into the places, the plantations and the outlands to inform African-Americans that they were free when emancipation came about. But you know, when you talk about the dates, there's so much going on and so many historians here. You're stealing my thunder, but I'm trying, you know, I've been trying to say, well, where will I come in at? Where will I come in? But you know, that when we talk about dates with the USCT, the Emancipation Proclamation transformed the Civil War. Before then, African Americans were not allowed to bear arms or anything of that nature there. But it brought about General Order Number 143, which brought on the Bureau of Colored Troops with the formation of the United States Colored Troop. And Abraham Lincoln said himself, quoted, that without the African Americans joining in the Union in the battle, the Union would not have won the Civil War. And General Grant said the same: by allowing the African Americans to fight, we've gained a powerful ally. So, you know, talk about dates, and I know we're talking about Emancipation Proclamation. Actually, General McCook rode into here with his 300 troops on May 10th. And there was some, you know, newspaper documents that kind of dictate and kind of show us different dates and times where African Americans were actually on Centerville, where military post was out on Centerville in Leon County, were kind of informed on the 19th that this was coming on the 20th. So there's just so many dates. But when we're talking about that, May 20th Emancipation Proclamation was very important. And when we're talking about Juneteenth, we'll mention, and I won't mention it again. I applaud the county commission in Tallahassee for correcting a wrong that they were about to do, because most people use Juneteenth as just a catchphrase. That's all it is, because it's all it is for Florida, because it has nothing to do with us. May 20th, the importance of May 20th and everything that we do and everything that we represent. And I just want to applaud them for doing so. And hopefully, and looking forward to Commissioner Cox getting with the city, making sure that we do that. We're righting a wrong, you know, because we have to get the May 20th Emancipation Proclamation Day as a holiday for the state of Florida. Because like I believe someone else just said, May 9th, even Juneteenth, African-American, all slaves were not free. Delaware, Kentucky, and parts of Oklahoma still practice slavery until December 6th, the 13th Amendment. So I can go on, I'll come back in a little later. I don't want to take all the time, but there's just so much that can be talked about here as far as Florida's emancipation, May 20th, and Leon County as a whole as well.
Well, that's a beautiful segue here before we get, and Bob, I'll get back to you here in just a sec. On September 29th, Leon County government became the first county in Florida to officially recognize Florida's Emancipation Day. May 20th is a county holiday through a unanimous vote of the Leon County Board of County Commissioners. It now goes to the city, and Commissioner Dianne Williams-Cox, you guys got it teed up over there, right?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I want to thank the Leon County Commission for taking this bold step. I actually had an opportunity to go over and speak in favor of the county doing this. And so because we work so well together, I asked at the last commission meeting that our staff comes back with an agenda item for us to consider to make May 20th a paid holiday for city employees as well. And we think this is very important because my grandmother's grandmother was 8 years old when slaves were freed. And I grew up knowing about the 20th of May. Although I grew up in Gaston County, but we knew about the 20th of May. There were celebrations, and as Ms. Barnes said, I was told of the school being let out for the holiday for those kinds of things. And so we need to right this wrong that's taking place, at least in the state of Florida. And I will venture to say that if we want to nationalize a holiday, the date that should be nationalized is the date that all slaves were free, with the ratification of the 13th Amendment, which was, as I'm understanding in history, was December 6th. So that would be my push to do that. And it's also, I don't want to offend anyone by saying this, but it's kind of embarrassing when people of color, we don't know our history well enough to allow others to tell us what date we should celebrate, or we get caught up out there because something sounds jazzy or snazzy. No, our history is our history, and we need to make sure that our children know our history and others know our history, and that we need to stick to it and be proud of our heritage and our history. So I'm happy to be a part of making sure that we memorialize the 20th of May by making sure that city employees have a paid holiday for that date.
Okay, Bob Holladay, and then Dr. Thompson, I want to talk to you for a sec. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I could not agree with that more. The sentiments just expressed. There are a lot of issues here. This is a much deeper issue, I think, than picking the correct date to commemorate. It's also an issue of community and how you define community and how you define identity. I mean, it's interesting that it's election day to have this program, because it has, my lifetime, and every time there's one of these national elections, one of the covert issues that never gets talked about is how we define ourselves in the United States. Are we a community in which everything gets nationalized, or are we a community of communities in which Florida, for example, can honor its Emancipation Day, and not have it be Juneteenth or whatever the rest of the nation decides to mark, and so forth. And I've said this to Althemese. I mean, one of the ironies of this, and I think she probably thought I was kidding, but I really wasn't. I mean, one of the great ironies of this whole discussion is that this is kind of a states' rights issue. I mean, do the states have the right to commemorate the dates that they set on something like this, or is this really going to be a national Juneteenth holiday? So there are all sorts of deeper questions that go into this, and I probably didn't make a lot of sense there very much, but I hope I sort of got my message through.
Okay, well, Dr. Sandra Thompson, there, since the history, the heritage, the legacy of communities is certainly your bailiwick. It's even connected to the name of the organization that you have founded. What are your thoughts on, again, a national versus a more localized and significant to the community, that community observance of this? How do you think?
Well, I'd first like to say I had an opportunity to live and work in Houston, Texas for 7 years. And significantly, Houston is about 45 minutes from Galveston. And what they celebrate in Texas is Juneteenth. They celebrate it because that is when they were notified at Galveston that they were free, significantly later than anyone else. And so having grown up here in Leon County, I'd never heard of Juneteenth until the period of time that I lived there. And they have big celebration, but they have no recollection. They know nothing about May 20th. So I think that it's important to look at each state in context to what they value, what they know, and what their ancestors have experienced. And there are other individuals that I'm aware of whose ancestors talked about May 20th as well. Additionally, I think it's wonderful that even as far more south than at least Tallahassee, Bartow has reference to it. But I think one of the things I happened to run across today is that in Jackson County, Mariana, they celebrated May 20th. That's when they also were aware that enslaved people were free. So I think that in terms of context, in terms of historical knowledge, in terms of many of us being the direct descendants of enslaved people and have celebrated this all of our lives, that this is something that needs to be validated for Florida, and that is May 20th.
There's almost an analog, because I lived for a short period of time in Texas as well. And going there, I thought, oh, Cinco de Mayo is going to be a huge celebration. And I get to San Antonio and I find out, oh, no, that's a little piddly thing. We celebrate the Battle of Flowers. That is our big celebration. And the entire city, of course, has a huge riotous gathering for that particular thing. So yes, there is certainly different ways of looking at different events in various communities. Althemese Barnes, however, you've got a number of Florida cities, specifically Miami-Dade, that are already moving in the direction of an acknowledgement and a celebration of Juneteenth. So what do you do? Call those guys up and say, folks, we are taking another path and we would like you to trod that with us, or what do you do now?
Well, we did just what you said. I was really surprised. I said, oh, we are on a roll. Leon County, the capital city. We are going to get this word out there. And then what was it, about 3 days ago came this word. It just so happened I had met with a couple of legislators and kind of explained things, and right off they got it. They said to me, okay, we got it. Yeah, May 20th is the Florida Day. So what we've done very kindly is communicate to the commissioners in Miami, in Dade County, and shared with them the chronology that one of our historians, Mary May, in combination with Clifton Lewis, put together for us. We've shared that with them. We've shared with them the resolution from the county that Florida is the day. And we also have the adoption or participation of the chairman of the national board of the NAACP, who says their position has always been that Florida's day is May 20th, 1865. And if there is to be a national holiday, the national NAACP says it should be December 6th rather than the other dates because of the 13th Amendment. So it's sort of like one of the other people shared with me who's kind of working this team was, to adopt June 19th as the Florida Day is like America adopting Bastille Day as America's Independence Day. It's disjointed up in there somewhere. And so we plan to stay diligent with this. And it's not to put anybody's state down, because as Jarvis said, these things happened at different times. Mm-hmm. And Clifton Lewis has been here 2 or 3 times as the keynote for our emancipation for Florida. And as he mentions the other states too and the different dates, but he said on this day, May 20th, is the day that this enforcement and everything happened here.
Mr. Lewis,
At this point, I just want to, the issue isn't so much May 20th or June 19th, it's emancipation. That process, it wasn't an event, it was a process, freed this country to be able to commemorate what has been called the second independence for the United States. When Abraham Lincoln did the Gettysburg Address, he announced a new birth of freedom. That is very, very significant. Isn't it interesting that all current events, no matter where they are in the United States, focus on the Emancipation Proclamation, not December 6th. I am not opposed to December 6th. I think it's great. The only thing I want to point out is that I believe that when Frederick Douglass said that January the 1st should be remembered as if it was 1,000 years, and a Black preacher was with him said, may God forget my people if they forget this day. Speaking of January 1st, that was the announcement. That's when they were informed that that was a movement to set them free. And you know, when Douglass was asked, what is the logic when you consider the wording of the proclamation, all the nuances? Frederick Douglass said, it's not logic the slaves care about, it's the trump of Jubilee. And so it was January 1st. The point I want to make also is you think about the American Revolution. Independence did not come to this country on July the 4th, 1776. Independence was declared on that date. It was another decade before the Constitution was finally ratified that made independence a reality. So that's why I believe Frederick Douglass and others focus on when the bell was rung, January the 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation. There's no celebration for the 13th Amendment, which I think is a terrific amendment. And I have no problem if the nation decides to adopt December the 6th, no problem at all. That's a logical date. But I just wanted to point out that January the 1st is when the bell was rung. That's when the doors were open. That's when this country entered into a new birth of freedom. I want to make another point about the Louisiana, being a Louisiana native. I recall in the 1960s, late 1950s, my uncles and aunts would come down from Texas and celebrate that. We didn't even know what it was called. They know it was a holiday. And then a month later, July the 4th, they came back for another celebration. We thought, my God, they had 2 Independence Days. They didn't know at the time what it was all about. So if I could summarize by just saying, we want to establish a process whereby the students are taught the history of emancipation, regardless of what day we accept. May 20th certainly needs to be the day for Florida. There's no question about that. But in terms of a national holiday, we need to make sure all of the relevant dates, what happened in Washington, D.C. in April 1862 when D.C. slaves were freed, what happened in Tennessee with Andrew Johnson, what happened in Florida with General McCook, what happened in Texas with General Granger, all of that needs to be taught. But they need to understand that's when the country experienced a new birth of freedom.
Mr. Lewis, that is so beautifully put. And I'm wondering, how do you take these various concepts that you just elucidated and incorporate them into a more comprehensive history that can be taught to everyone? Because for those of us, and Jarvis, let me bring you in on here too. Given the amount of animosity and conflict and divisiveness that we have today, it seems almost incomprehensible that even colored troops bearing arms could go into some of these areas and say, excuse me, sir, but if you have any enslaved folks, I just want to let you know they're free. that would not have been a popular pronouncement coming particularly from a person in arms, a person of color. I can't even imagine that taking place in 1865 or even in 2020.
Right. That's well, that's so true. That's so true. And I want to allude to that, but I want to first kind of piggyback on what Clifton was saying, that Lewis was saying was a lot. But you know, my thing is, I've always said history is not objective, it's definitive. It happened. We can't change it. We can only, all this revised history that we have, a lot of times it comes into play. Even going back to Texas, General Granger came into Galveston, Texas to read the Texas Proclamation, General Order Number 3. The Emancipation Proclamation was read at a later date. So that needs to be said also. So Juneteenth is a farce and a long ways in Texas. It's certainly here in the state of Florida as we move forward with making our date May 20th. Of course, there's so much to do. And yes, of course, and soldiers went out, the 2nd Infantry Regiment, USCT, and the 99th, came back into the North Florida area after the Emancipation Proclamation was read and worked in martial law and going out to the different plantations and places saying, you all are free, plantation owners, you must let these people free. And a lot of white owners, white civilians had never seen African Americans walking around with muskets in their hand. In other ways, allowing it. So there was a shock to them as well as it was a shock to a lot of African Americans that they were free. So of course, there was some disdain, a lot of disdain against African American soldiers during that time, but they weathered the storm and they came through and made it happen. So Emancipation Proclamation was serious during that time. It brought about the African Americans being able to go out into the country, go out in places, carry arms that they were not allowed to wear before, to carry before, and help usher in martial law and usher in Reconstruction as well, working with the Freedmen's Society and doing so. But it's very important because during that time, 1860, just to bring about the point of emancipation, how important it is and important the history be directed and facts be given in the right proper way. In 1860, the census had Florida with 140,000 population. 63,000 of those were African Americans. 62,000 of those were enslaved. So emancipation, May 20th, meant a great deal. In Leon County, there were 12,343 population. 3,380 were white, 9,089 were African Americans, enslaved. So there was, Leon County in 1860 was 73% African Americans, 73% African American, but 70% were enslaved. So when we talk about Emancipation Proclamation, May 20th, it's serious, it's important that we make Florida. You gotta crawl before you walk, you gotta walk before you run. Leon County, we've crawled. We're working on the state to walk. We'll get to the nation to run. So the importance of Emancipation Proclamation should be brought to the forefront of what we're talking about. And there's just so much, and I won't take up too much more time, but I could go on and on. And I know we all feel that way because we are passionate about Florida getting history correct. Not
Dianne Williams-Cox.
It is ironic that Miami should be pushing Juneteenth. I mean, because in 1865 there was no Miami. It was a mangrove swamp down there, which is really pretty interesting.
Well, one thing we just
Tom,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, if I could interject, I put in the chat box a statute that I wanted you to reference, 683. In our own Florida statute at the state level, they have indicated that Juneteenth is when slaves in Florida were freed. So our history, our state history is incorrect. So if anyone's reading that and thinking that they're correct, that's wrong. So we have a lot of things to correct and a lot of places to correct it in. And I think that it should start right here in the capital city. Ms. Barnes and myself went last legislative session, and we lobbied the Black Caucus to look at this. And there were members there who openly said they were not aware of May 20th. And so I don't know if that means that they came from somewhere else or what have you, but Florida statutes also require the teaching of African-American history, but it is not being enforced in every county. So we're trying to clean some things up and try to educate folks. But if we're not able to, or if someone's not able to enforce the Florida law that is on the books, then we have a bigger issue, because we need our children to know this history. We need them to learn it, and we need to make sure that it's being taught. And if it is being taught, we want it taught correctly. We want the right history being taught. So it has to start with us doing what we can do, but then the Florida legislature has some cleanup that they need to do as well. And we have tried to get the attention of some lawmakers to understand that this is not correct. It says in that citation I sent you that Juneteenth is the day that slaves in Florida were freed. That simply is not true. That's Texas. And so we need to get that corrected. And in this particular citation, there's no mention of Emancipation Day, no mention of May 20th. And so we've got some work to do, and the time is now to get this right, so that we can perpetuate a correct history. And we need to know the history so that we can perpetuate the correct history.
Well, session will start in March, but they'll be coming up here for their committee meetings maybe as early as next week after the election. Have you guys made any tried to meet with any of them coming up here in November and December?
Not yet, because everybody's focused on their election.
Right. I mean,
So,
it would have to be
after the election, we may be able to get some traction.
Mhm.
Although it would seem logical that the capital city's local delegation might be the most appropriate
They are on
mechanism
board.
to do that. So yes,
Our
yes,
local delegation is on board, although we're hoping to get a new member to fill a vacancy, but they're on board. But they're all of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, you need a
And-
Republican. You need a
And being able to get some bipartisanship on this is going to be our challenge.
I have spent the last 2 years lobbying them about history, post-secondary history and civic literacy. And I've met a good number of them down there. Maybe you and I can communicate, and I can send you some names that it might be worth talking to on the Republican side. I'm thinking particularly of Vansa Lupus down in Miami, and 2 or 3 others that might be able to help on that.
Okay.
I
So
smell a new caucus may be a brewing. Dr.
Yeah.
Thompson, you had your hand up there, please.
Yes, I was just thinking that, within our country, codifying laws is the critical way that things happen and impact everyone. And so before there's codification, there's always research, and there's always information, and there's always validating. And I think that the critical reason why this issue needs to be addressed, because in a lot of ways it validates the footprint
Yes.
of enslaved people and their descendants and their overall economic impact on the county, on the state, and on the nation. And I think once we begin to do that, it may be a little thing we think about little Leon, or a little thing we think about Florida. But as we think about the entire nation and the divisiveness, is that we've got to take the whole country back to looking at what is fact and what can be validated, so that it can impact not only how we live and what we do, but how we think. It's more than what somebody told me. I've got to go look at what the facts are. Who was here, what they did, when they came, and how they impacted our society.
And exactly, Althemese Barnes, what you were trying to do and continues to be done in the context of the John G. Reilly House Museum, which is essentially bringing the history home. The legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is magnificent, and we all need to know that. But when you can put an actual contemporary connection to that history, look along Franklin Boulevard. It didn't look like this 150 years ago. Here's what it looked like. Look at the spirit homes. Look at the displays within the Reilly House and the Black Archives and some of these other places so that people can see, oh my gosh, this is how it was and how it connects to today.
Exactly. Exactly. One thing I want to say about legislatively too, with the chairman of the national board, they have already communicated with their lobbyist, Pamela Birch Ford, and she has offered, and this goes along with what Commissioner Cox was saying, the county legislators are on board, but she has offered to work with the Black Caucus or anybody else through NAACP to help draft a bill to commemorate this Florida piece and try to get that corrected. So that is one of the sources that we are in contact with, and they are very interested in this and want to be a part of. Also, about 2 weeks ago, I met with a senator from Miami. And interestingly, we had sent ahead some of our material that was developed locally. And I would say in less than 5 minutes or 3 minutes, he looked at me, he said, you know, you are right. We have the wrong date that we're working with. Florida is May 20th. And he said, and guess what else? I said, what else? He said, and that's my birthday. And he was the one last year who put in the resolution in the legislature to make Juneteenth the day. But he just didn't know. So he said, I'm committed to this year, making sure that people understand that May 20th is the day that slaves in Florida were freed. So, you know, it takes what we are doing right now just to keep touching as many sources as we can to get the real history out. And again, it's not to diminish anybody's history, but as Jarvis said, and Clifton and others, it was a process, not a one-day waving of the flag. Hey, look what we did, but the process.
Has anybody talked to Representative Geraldine Thompson about this? I mean,
You would be a good one, Bob Holladay, to do that.
she's pretty formidable. You know, she's the one that got the Lake County folks not to put the Confederate statue down there. Plus the one, I mean, you've got to admire anybody that beats the governor in court over the Supreme Court. And so,
well, trust me, Bob, you would be a good person to approach Senator Representative Thompson.
I'll try to talk to her when they come in town. I'll try to go down there.
Right. And
would you go with me?
To Noah, would be fine. I don't know if it might help for me to go. I don't mind going with, but you might do better, Karen, like having the commissioner or Dr. Thompson, or not that I mind going with anybody, but there is some history.
Yes,
Okay.
and I see the Emancipation Caucus growing in strength and numbers even as we speak here.
I'd like to say, Bob, if I could, I've been invited to, I do a lot of lectures and workshops. I've been invited throughout the state by legislators to speak at their Juneteenth program. So that kind of lets you know where a lot of our legislators are.
Yeah.
I think it's to know one history is to know it, but to see it. That's why we do in our reenactments with African Americans on the battlefield. I like to say we put a face on the battlefield.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't aware over 209,000 African Americans fought during the Civil War and with the Army and the Navy. Over 68,000 gave their lives in battles and from disease. So the history is just there, but it's kind of amazing that you would think someone that has aspired to a legislative position did not know about May 20th and did not know that Juneteenth had nothing to do with Florida. What if it would have been June 12th? That wouldn't have been
certainly Dianne Williams-Cox.
That wouldn't have been
There
a
we
catch
go.
phase, and we wouldn't be talking where we are now. But that's just kind of amazes you that people in certain areas, in certain places, don't know the history, don't know the facts.
You are, after all, talking about a legislative body which about 10 years ago made history an elective in our colleges and universities. You don't even have to take it, which is which is
Oh,
unbelievable.
close. Allow me to add this bit about history. Especially this whole process of the Emancipation Proclamation, we always focus on freeing the slaves, and that's absolutely important. But that is not why Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. You touched upon it earlier. The Emancipation Proclamation was issued to end the Civil War. It was a wartime measure. Lincoln said in the closing, and upon this act, sincerely believed to be an act of justice, warranted by the Constitution upon military necessity.
Right,
It was
right.
designed to end the Civil War. It did that, and it happened to free thousands of slaves. So when we design the curriculum, we want to make sure that these elements are built in, so our children and others understand. The reason why folks jumped on Juneteenth was because they don't know the history. And Juneteenth sounds very catchy, you know, and Texas has done a magnificent job. We need to applaud them. But it's May 20th here, and I have no problem with December 6th nationally.
Well,
January 1 was good.
and it also shows that the warp and woof of Black history is much more than has been heretofore promulgated throughout the land. There is so much to be learned by everyone involved, and that is where the next traction is going to have to be, to get this more deeply embedded into the education system, not just for the kids, but it sounds like for the grown-ups, and particularly for
Right.
Florida lawmakers. Folks, we're just about out of time. Let's go around, give everyone just 1 minute if you can. We haven't imposed time limits before, but just take 1 minute and any final thoughts you might have. And the Commissioner, Dianne Williams-Cox, let's start with you.
Well, I'll just say that I'm looking forward to the city moving forward with our agenda item to do the right thing and join the county. And I'm hoping that if the capital city does this, then the other counties will follow our lead. And we're happy to work with anyone to make sure that we write our history, RIGHT and WRITE, our history.
Thank you so much, Dianne. Jarvis Rosier, your turn, sir.
Okay, Bob, again, thanks for allowing me to come on. And I just want to say that was Sergeant Major Jarvis Rosier, but we're good with that. I just want to be thankful for being a part of here. Thanks for Leon County again, doing what they're doing. And thanks for the Commissioner Cox and the others for working to make City of Tallahassee also. Because it's very important, because we've been celebrating May 20th for a long time. And we needed to document it as a local holiday and then state. But I'm just glad to be a part of it. I want to continue to work with all the those on the call here to do what it takes. And that's letting people know that our history is not objective, you know, it's definitive. And once we make sure that we get the facts correct before we make a mistake.
Sergeant Major, thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate that. And from Bountiful Bartow, Clifton Lewis, any final thoughts from you, sir?
Thank you very much. There's no doubt that emancipation and the process of freedom from slavery absolutely should be commemorated. Because, you know, until those slaves were free, Thomas Jefferson's high-sounding words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident," were nothing more than sounding brass and tinkling cymbals. And freeing those slaves freed this country. Each area should commemorate what was unique to their area during that process. And that should be a national holiday, possibly December the 6th. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Sandra Thompson, your turn.
Well, thank you so much again for having us, and I appreciate it. I also wanted to mention my employer, Florida A&M University, who provides an opportunity for me to do this great work. And I also wanted to just say that a critical reason why I started Legacy Communities of North Florida was to carry on the work that Ms. Barnes started at Reilly House, focusing on those communities that started in plantations and grew out of plantations. And those were the places where the 20th of May was celebrated as well, at the schools, at the churches with drums. And so to get the history right, to get the state and the county to acknowledge the role and what's important to people who are descendants of enslaved people would be a great thing for our local and our state community. So I'm excited to work on this and expect it to come to true fruition.
Can't wait for the updates coming from you, Doctor. Bob Holladay.
I just want to say that May 20th is not only historically important, it's also important just for the community. It's one of those things that the Reilly House and Althemese have really pushed, and it's one of those things that can unify all aspects of the community and has. And if Juneteenth becomes the official state Emancipation Day, it's going to undercut all of that. It's going to undercut localism and local unity and community in a lot of ways, and that's important.
Well, perhaps another option on this is to start the celebration on May 20th and carry it through Juneteenth. And then you have nearly an entire month. Just a thought. Althemese Barnes, again, thank you for everything you did to make this all possible. You get the final word.
Oh, and I was just going to say what you just said. Commissioner Dianne Cox said a few weeks later, start May and go to June. But I would just like to thank everyone for being a part of and being not a part of, but passionate and working to help get this done. And I've already said post-election, we just want to see who's in place so we'll know where to go.
Yeah.
That next level. We can work at local, we can work at state, but we need to get to whomever is in charge up in DC. So I know they must have historians. If they don't know already, they can assign someone to go and study this, research it. So I just say, hey, I think we have a good group, and it's more than just what we have here today, who are very, very concerned about this misrepresentation, misunderstanding of history. So hopefully, in the end, as Bob was saying, even it's a community issue. Our young people, when we see them out there marching and protesting, and we're talking about lynching and whatever, and social justice and healing, this is the foundation of that whole piece.
Althemese, thank you so much. And I can't wait to see how this moves forward. And I will be checking back with the entire group as this proceeds. Thank you all. Clifton Lewis, Dianne Williams-Cox, Dr. Sandra Thompson, Sergeant Major Jarvis Rosier, Bob Holladay, and Althemese Barnes. Thank you all for being part of a very special Perspectives, and happy Emancipation Day, May 20th to all of you. Thanks for being a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye-bye.
Perspectives produced by WFSU Public Media in Tallahassee. Thanks, Taylor, Paul Dam, Amy Diaz de Villegas, Devin Bittner, Tricia Moynihan, Lydell Rawls, Kim Kelling, and I'm Tom Flanigan. We hope that you can join us next week. How can you protect yourself from the potential double whammy of a flu bout coupled with a COVID-19 infection? We'll talk it over with a panel of experts next week, right here on Perspectives from WFSU Public Media. Thanks for joining us.